On a wooden table where paper is the territory of battle, a man has surrendered to the weight of his own wakefulness and has let his head fall upon his arms. The pen stopped halfway through a line, and behind him, as if the air had opened a crack, the night and its creatures enter. Owls with round eyes that show teeth that are really silences, bats that vibrate like curtains of fear, a still lynx that looks with a lucidity almost wounded, and a cat whose bristling back contains a shadow older than language, thus begins to breathe. The sleep of reason produces monsters, the print in which Francisco de Goya y Lucientes launches a sentence that is at once warning and method and mirror. Reason asleep engenders that which superstition desires and ignorance celebrates, and yet imagination united with reason is the mother of wonders. Everything therefore depends on awakening, and on the pact between light and shadow. Goya conceived this image around the final years of the 18th century, when he was preparing the series Los Caprichos, a set of prints conceived as a fierce and lucid critique of the vices of his time, of proud foolishness, of corruption disguised as importance, of marriage for interest, of clerical and courtly hypocrisy, of the superstition that captures minds and souls in a country that sought to be modern without ceasing to belong to its ghosts. The artist was coming from an illness that left him deaf, and that silence forced him to listen to another kind of noise, the one inside his head, and that of a society that spoke with symbols in plazas and confessionals. The chosen technique was not accidental etching combined with aquatint, with needle and burin, allowed him to build zones of vibrant half-darkness, masses of black that are thought and webs of gray that are atmosphere, a chiaroscuro that does not imitate the Baroque but distills it until it becomes moral semantics. The man sleeping at the center, many have wanted to see him as a self-portrait of Goya, others as the emblem of every enlightened man besieged by night. The owls that approach seem to offer him pencils, as if tempting him with a twisted inspiration, and the bats are blindness flying aimlessly. The lynx with its open eyes represents the vigilance of reason that records everything even in the dark, and the cat is the cunning that lurks, ready to leap if the sleeper does not awaken. The minimal furniture, paper, ink, workbench, is a sign that the battle takes place in thought. That is the stage of the Enlightenment century in Spain, where dreaming could mean creative rest or guilty abandonment. And the word sueño, dream, carries that double edge in Spanish. It can mean to sleep or to yearn, and Goya plays with the ambiguity because he knows that imagination without rule is a monster, but rule without imagination is the tomb of the arts. The plate belongs to number 43 of Los Caprichos, and was published at the end of the year 1799. Though the series remained on sale for only a short time due to fear of the Inquisition and pressure from the offended. The painter withdrew the copies and gave the plates to the king in exchange for a pension for his son, thus saving the physical work and his own safety. The print, however, circulated in copies that multiplied throughout the 19th and 20th centuries through the Calcografía Nacional and other workshops. With each new printing, the copper plates suffered the wear of acid and the friction of the tarlatan, which produced subtle differences in the grays, in the sharpness of the lines, and in the strength of the blacks. Some restorers cleaned oxidized varnishes and stabilized corrosion, returning to the image a breath closer to the original intention, without erasing the noble fatigue of the metal work to its limit. The phrase everyone quotes, "The sleep of reason produces monsters," appeared already in the preparatory drawings, accompanied by another statement that is key. Imagination, abandoned by reason, produces impossible monsters. United with it, she is the mother of the arts and the source of wonders. There lies the manifesto of the Goyesque method. It is not about enthroning a dry reason, nor celebrating an unrestrained imagination, but about tightening both to illuminate an uncomfortable truth. That is why the image does not condemn the nocturnal creatures as if they were simple demons. It also shows them with irony and with an almost scientific curiosity, as if saying, these forms live within us. They are part of the repertoire of symbols our culture produces when it lowers its guard. The morality of the print is responsible, not Puritan, awaken and work, look and judge, do not sleep in the zone where your vigilance sustains the dignity of the world. Los Caprichos were read by some contemporaries as a satire of customs, by others as a pamphlet dangerously close to a critique of the church and nobility. Censorship surrounded the series from its birth, and the artist had to fold his sails. Nevertheless, Plate 43 survived in the imagination because its message is universal and because its iconography does not point to a person but to a state of the soul. Later, the Romantics would see in it the door to an art that explores the inner night. The Symbolists would find a grammar of animals as signs of psyches, and the Surrealists would read the print as a precedent for the free association of the dreamlike. In fact, the work has been cited as a genealogy of the century of modern monsters, where the dream of progress, when it forgets its responsibility, produces political and technical horrors that intelligence should have foreseen. Goya anticipated the industrial century and the totalitarian regimes with a simple sentence: if reason sleeps, history awakens monsters. There was no lack of subtler interpretations that saw in the owls not only foolishness but also false erudition, the hollow knowledge that delights in citations in Latin without ever touching reality. Bats as pieces of night that erase the contours of things. A cat as superstition that purrs until it becomes a meow, and a lynx as the critical eye capable of seeing in darkness. Goya places his face between his arms, not to hide but to measure the weight of the fatigue of one who fights with the pen against powers that act with knives of rumor. The composition is crossed by diagonals that invite one to enter from the lower right corner to the whirl of wings in the upper part, and then to return to the table where the minimal clarity insists. The stopped pen is a moment, not a renunciation. The absent lamp is on the sleeper's forehead, who upon awakening will continue writing. Technique is part of the meaning. The etching draws the structure of the world. The aquatint spills the shadows where monsters can nest, and the touches of dry point give that nervous electricity to the fur, to the feathers, to the edge of the paper. Goya masters the alchemy of acid baths and resins to graduate the grays, as if writing music with salt and fire. The result is an atmosphere that is not naturalistic but mental, a night that happens inside a head and at the same time in a nation. That double register turns the print into an emblem of a Spain that debates between the light of the enlightened and the inertia of its oldest shadows. There is also a biographical thread that should not be ignored. The painter had gone deaf, and that rupture with the sound of the outer world opened in him a radical listening toward his inner world. From that listening were born witches, Sabbaths, donkeys disguised as doctors, and also this nocturnal workshop where exhausted reason lowers its guard, and sleep brings a fauna of warnings that are at once temptations. It is hard to say it, but the monster does not come from outside. It comes from the crack in our vigilance. That is why the message is not one of exorcism, but of responsibility. That is the ethical edge of the image. The material history of the print keeps its own wounds and healings. Copies from different eras show variations in the sharpness of the legend, in the brightness of the lynx's eyes, in the density of the cloud of bats and owls. Conservators have debated how much to clean, how much of the historical patina to leave, so that the modern viewer may breathe what Goya intended, and at the same time hear the passage of time. That technical discussion connects with the philosophical reading. To what extent should a society be cleaned of its layers of habit without erasing its memory? To what extent is it worth awakening without destroying the creative dream? When imagination marries reason, the arts flourish. When it weds ignorance, the monster is born. That is the compass. Some have wanted to find taboos and secret gestures, and they are not lacking in symbolic ground, because animal iconography in Goya is a moral vocabulary. Owl as true wisdom and as false wisdom, depending on context. Bat as blindness and contagion of shadows. Cat as fear and deceit. Lynx as lucidity that pierces the veil. There is no occult message, nor mysterious brotherhood. There is a severe and compassionate pedagogy aimed at a reader who knows how to see double meaning and recognize within himself the theater of these signs. In the lower margin, the phrase is blow and method, written without complacent metaphor, so that the image is not reduced to ornament. The sentence and the scene need each other. The word fixes the reading, the image complicates it, so that thought does not sleep in dogmas. Posterity turned this plate into the motto of libraries and schools, into the banner of journalists and scientists, into the slogan of artists who defend imagination without renouncing rigor. Its validity does not come from fashion, but because the phrase describes a constant mechanism of history. When civic vigilance is surrendered, rumors and superstitions grow. When criticism withdraws, charlatans advance. When imagination divorces responsibility, easy solutions with monstrous consequences arrive. That is why this sleeping figure does not let us sleep, because the paper is open, and the pen waits, and the night is full of eyes. Thus, Goya gives us an image that is both ethical and aesthetic, a laboratory of ink and a mirror of the nation, personal nightmare and diagnosis of the modern world. What is admirable is that it does not close hope, because the same print contains its medicine. Awaken, look, think, unite your imagination with your reason, work until light becomes yours again. Then the animals will return to their forest and give you back the pencils as if they were branches of a tree of invention. The dream that produces monsters is not that of poetry but of reason that abdicates. When imagination and criticism join hands, works are born that heal worlds. The print says it in the austere language of copper and acid, and with the secret tenderness of a man who knew that night exists, but so does lucidity, and that between both, every day the destiny of a life, of a craft, and of a country is played. The image of Goya is not exhausted in its moral interpretation, nor in its historical context, because beneath the critical surface throbs a deeper meditation on the mind and its abysses, and because the artist, by turning reason into a sleeping figure, invented a visual metaphor that continues to define the limits of modern thought. That figure leaning over the table is not only a weary sage, it is the century itself, worn out by arguing between dogma and science, between superstition and progress, abandoning itself to sleep, believing that by closing its eyes darkness will disappear, and the opposite happens. By sleeping, reason summons the shadows it denies, and each owl, each bat, each cat that enters through the window is a repressed thought demanding to be seen. That is why Plate 43 does not belong only to Los Caprichos. It belongs to the genealogy of Western consciousness, which since then has understood that monsters are not born of night, but of the negligence of day. The century in which Goya worked knew the promise of the Enlightenment, but also its price. The artist saw how the ideas of liberty and science were deformed in the mouths of politicians who used them to justify abuses and wars, and he understood that evil does not come from backwardness, but from the arrogance of believing oneself awake while still dreaming. Thus, in his Madrid workshop, surrounded by noise and silence, he raised this warning, drawing on copper with the precision of a surgeon who knows that every line engraves a wound in collective conscience. The metal was his mirror, and acid, his instrument of truth. Etching does not forgive error. Each bite of acid leaves an irreparable mark, and that irreversibility was also his philosophy. What is written in history cannot be erased. What man does while reason sleeps will remain engraved forever. In the drafts that survive, Goya wrote phrases that do not appear in the final edition, and that help us understand his intent. He spoke of the artist as the guide of society, as one who must unite imagination and reason to free humanity from its own deception. That conviction explains why the image is not only critique but also program. Reason must keep watch without killing imagination. Imagination must create without breaking judgment. It is a precarious yet necessary balance. When one dominates the other, the result is monster. When both accompany each other, the result is art. Hence the dark background is not mere threat but a workshop of metamorphosis, where shadows can become allies if the dreamer decides to awaken. There is a detail that often goes unnoticed. The cat that appears on the right, almost blended with the penumbra, does not look at the sleeper but at the viewer. Its fiery gaze implicates us, reminds us that we are observers and also accomplices. The print is a moral mirror that returns to the one who contemplates it. The uncomfortable question, do I also sleep? Have I allowed my thinking to drift off? while the creatures of habit circle me. That is why the true center of the work is neither the table nor the bent body, but that space that opens between the animal's eyes and ours, a triangle of attention that transforms the spectator into a character and art into an ethical experience. The Goya of this period was a man divided between court and conscience, painter of kings and portraitist of human madness. He had learned that power fears irony more than violence. That is why Los Caprichos are poison wrapped in humor, a gallery of vices where every grotesque figure is at once ridiculous and tragic. The Sleep of Reason produces monsters is the synthesis of all those satires, but also the key that opens and explains them. Without it, Los Caprichos would be a collection of anecdotes. With it, they become a visual philosophy of lucidity in times of darkness. Throughout the 19th century, the print was adopted by liberal thinkers and scientists as an emblem of critical thought. Darwin himself had a reproduction hanging in his study, and writers like Victor Hugo and Baudelaire saw in it the perfect image of the modern artist, alone at his work table, fighting against the ghosts of his era. In the 20th century, the work traveled to universities and intellectual movements that sought a balance between creative imagination and political reason. Even Freud cited it as a metaphor for the unconscious and for the repressed desires that emerge when moral vigilance sleeps. The psychoanalytic interpretation added a new layer of reading. The monsters not only represent collective superstition, but also the internal forces that reason represses to sustain its own order. The restorers who worked on the plates at the Prado Museum and the Calcografia Nacional documented the fragility of the original copper and the beauty of its scars. The bites of acid created microscopic reliefs that to the touch feel like the heartbeat of a metallic heart. The deeper areas of aquatint were filled with powdered resin applied to heat that melted like tears, and those solidified tears are what produced the misty texture of the night. The technical craft here becomes a metaphor for the moral process. Each layer of resin is a layer of reason filtering chaos, each washing with acid a trial, each pressure on the press a consequence. The modern viewer who stops before the print in the silent hall of a museum is not only observing a historical document, but an active mirror. He feels that those winged creatures also fly above his desk, his screen, his own insomnia. Goya's monsters are no longer witches or superstitions, they are algorithms, media noise, fear of thinking differently. The round eyes of the owls still gaze from the shadow, but now they inhabit our own technologies, and for that reason the phrase keeps its edge. Reason asleep engenders its new demons every time thought surrenders to dogma or to laziness. The warning remains valid like a moral clock, ticking from the copper each time the world forgets that lucidity must be earned every day. In the half-light of the imaginary workshop where Goya engraved this plate, we can see him bent over the sheet, listening to the hiss of acid, corroding metal, a sound resembling that of a serpent or of a breath rising from the earth. And while the acid works, the artist meditates on his country, on children who learn dogmas instead of ideas, on women subjected to superstitions, on men who confuse power with reason. In that thought, the print takes shape as a mirror of warning not against night, but against the abandonment of conscience. The copper thus becomes an altar, and the engraving a secular prayer. The creatures surrounding the sleeper are not identical. Some smile, others seem to scream, and some simply watch. That uneven chorus suggests that evil has not one face, that the monsters of sleeping reason can be sweet or ridiculous as well as terrible. The most dangerous are those that seem harmless, those disguised as wisdom, those that speak with a gentle voice. The lesson is subtle. Reason must not expel imagination, but domesticate it, turning it into a tool of moral invention. That is why the title refers not to dreams in general, but to the sleep of reason. That is the moment when the mind abdicates and lets itself be dragged by its own fatigue. Every stroke of the engraving contains an energy that still vibrates, as if Goya had wanted to trap a lightning bolt in the copper. The line forming the cat's back is an echo of his anatomical studies. The curve of the owl's wing repeats the movement of his brushes in his paintings of witches. The gesture of the sleeper anticipates the bodies he will paint decades later in the black paintings. The continuity is clear. The series Los Caprichos is the laboratory where the modern Goya is born, the one who understands that horror and beauty are inseparable and that lucidity feeds on what it fears. In the end, what remains of the sleep of reason produces monsters is a lesson on the very act of thinking. Thinking tires. Thinking hurts. Thinking forces one to look at darkness without surrendering. And yet that fatigue is the only guarantee of humanity. Reason awake does not eliminate the monsters. It transforms them, forces them to speak and to deliver their secrets. That is why the man of the print can once again lift his head, take the pen, and continue writing. The owls will return to the night, the bats to the ceiling, and the cat will close its eyes in satisfaction. The table will remain the place where conscience renews itself every dawn, when thought defeats sleep and turns its shadows into clarity.